we initiate chaos. Theory guarantees that we'll play like lightning shots, sounding like thunder. For every time in the face that it hits us, we're faster. Well, they should know by now. They see the world keeps trying to shake us. It only wakes us. The pendulum swings. The pendulum swings. It's in a beautiful darkness. Only another. It's full steam ahead. Full steam ahead. All about the Petty Express. Misdirected from the start. It's a runaway train. I come a freight train. I come a freight train. In a beautiful darkness, the Petty Express. In a beautiful
Hey, you guys, it's Mo, and I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it would occur naturally in this universe, but I have found not one, but two people who believe that the defense is doing a stellar job. I know, I know. Just when you thought people as a species could not get dumber, it has happened. So I bring recipients of the de-evolution of man. Good morning, Sebastian, 80s Music Man, Rhinestone Wow Girl, Tammy. Well, I'm wondering if it's sock accounts. So now I haven't seen any support for the defense comments. Now that's because I typically use Court TV. I was scrolling through Law and Crime to see what their kind of general take was, and it's only within the last 2 days. This is, in fact, a comment under a snippet for this particular witness. Allison asked, "The prosecution has rested its case then," to which GML Wholesale said, "Weak case, to be honest." Now, we will continue on our receipts. Because, again, in an affront to forward evolution, we have under the forensics witness, DNA, the stuff that is unique to only you, even if you are related, even if every single member of your family bleeds on the same thing, your DNA is unique to you. A concept that seems to, well, defy the logic, again, of GML Wholesale. Defense attorney made DNA match look like some BS. Now, GM Wholesale, I welcome you on my channel. Reach out to me on Twitter if you would like to. Look, I am open to debate. If you can show or point to me on a map or a timestamp where the defense has made a cogent argument, I'm willing to hear it out. But then, just when I thought that the world could not get any dumber, in fact, it was just dumb enough to be real life, because he, in fact, got a partner. He got a partner in crime. Was it the last day? Oh yeah. Okay. Good God. It is amazing. I never thought I would find anyone who thought that this defense was a good idea. But apparently de-evolution and idiocracy is a thing. So day 15, we have the second of the Paul supporters, Mel 1228. Again, you are welcome to come onto my channel, explain where in the timestamp that the defense has made a good point, or that now an appellate attorney should be salivating, waiting to get this case if Paul is found guilty. Defense lady was a pain, but the judge's clear irritation. Ma'am, the judge has been unfailingly kind. It's been my irritation that you should have noticed. And what felt like dislike of this woman was very clear to the jury. To which normal humans responded, "I see no grounds for appeal at all." To which Mel said, Fifi, you and my chihuahua have the same name. The absence of visible error to a lay observer, parentheses, you. Again, uh, you go in with the assumption that your opponent is stupid, you will always lose a debate. I go in assuming not only is my opponent or the other standpoint valid, but I don't put morals behind it. I assume that, again, in good faith, if I'm going to look at a different argument and try to argue a different perspective, I try to steelman that approach in order to, again, broaden my own perspective, try to look at where I have blind spots. Uh, She was so bad that she irritated all the jurors all by her own self. Then Mel decided to grace us with her wisdom again. Now let's go to this timestamp where she accuses the prosecutor of mouthing things and being visibly irritated. There is only so much stupid.
I can't, I don't know whether it's been ultimately given. I could ascertain that information if the court wanted to know. But I think given, again, just the context of the pretrial litigation, or within that context, is the court denied the motion, right? So
Okay, so this is the point at which Mel believes that the state is unprofessional.
next request
Not to
would be-
mention that Kim K and Tristan Ponytail III have been snarking, have been kikiing, have been smiling. So please explain to me how the state has done any of those things. This is outside the presence of the jury, and this man is being surrounded by a black hole of mediocrity and stupidity. At some point, your face is going to say what your mouth can't. Now, she goes on to state that shame on the here we go. So this unprofessional prosecutor mouthing things and visibly irritated like a little brat should not be tolerated by the judge. Shame on the judge and the state and anyone who thinks that's acceptable. Monica, well done. She is blessing and telling Kim K she's been a fucking professional. This woman votes. God save America. Well done being a professional during this trial where everyone has hated you. She has 8 replies. Let's see what the rest of logical thinking humanity has to respond. Amelia, have you watched this trial? This guy's so guilty, it's disgusting. Their defense is literally, but he was nice to his brother in front of other people. That's all they have. There's no facts to dispute on any of the evidence, which Melly Me decides to be a grammar and spelling Nazi, completely ignoring the fact that that is actually a coherent statement regardless of the petty spelling mistakes. It's defense, not defense, parentheses, not a word. Melly Mel also says, I'm having a hard time reading your jumbled words. As let's see. To which let's go back to this. Someone replied that the defense lawyer has been an unrelenting black hole of stupid and unlikable. Little bit sleepy said, she's had her moments too, and he really did nothing other than lean back and sigh at the time mark. They're outside the presence of the jury. If the prosecutor is tired and wants to lean back and blink at the lights, he can. I'm really not seeing issues here. To which Melly says, little bit sleepy. Exactly. You're not seeing it. To which MTGI9 said, laughing, that time mark is from the defense. Love the prosecutors. They're brilliant. Stay mad. Paul's guilty as fuck. To which someone replied on one of her things, and maybe it was another day, but basically it said, Susan, Paul's guilty. Deal with it. So I have officially found the 2 people who think that the defense has done a wonderful job. which I didn't think was physically possible in America. So we didn't miss anything. Basically, what today is I'm going to do a bit of a story time and try to explain this case, kind of what the state has brought forward. If you guys haven't been watching the trial, or there's any questions that you have about the case, because I know that Wednesday was incredibly hard. So if there were questions about that you wanted to ask, we are going to be playing a little bit of some of Kim K's most ridiculous moments, because I'm in the mood to make fun and roast her again. So we'll do that. But then at the end, there's something that I've done for every trial, but I just haven't ever put it out there, because as someone who doesn't like to contact the victims' families and never, even though, look, I have dark humor and I have, a sense of humor and a mouth that would sometimes make Mother Teresa say she's not with us. I never want to put something out there that's going to hurt the family. But I always tend to write, even in my head, these alternate endings when I come to a trial. And I've never put them out because the first one I wrote was the first trial I did. Jason J, not yet. The first one I wrote in my head was for Gannon Stalk, and I didn't ever share it with anyone because I didn't, I'm not going to reach out to the parents that they have walked through such incredible pain. And I also didn't have their permission to use their son. But basically what I do is I write an alternate ending, what I wish had happened instead, or I soften it. And this is the first case that I feel like this family needs a happy ending. And I don't think that I'll be bothering anyone, though if anyone from the family contacts me, they don't like the alternate ending, I will take it down. My aim in all of this is never to bring more pain to the family or friends of the victims. But it is cathartic for me to give them a happy ending sometimes, especially with this really hard trials. Even if I don't share them, even if I don't publish them or anything like that, it just helps me at the end of these. So this is the first time I'll be sharing one of those, just because I really feel like the family needs a happy ending. But that is what, and Jason, despite all logic, despite all gravity, and the laws of physics remaining constant, we have found two people that believe that Paul has not been proven completely guilty in the state's case, and that the defense's expert on DNA is going to wipe the state's, basically, he's halfway, he's like this close to being exonerated. Again, I invite you, Melly Mel, or let's see, who is it? GML Wholesale, to contact me on Twitter if you would like to come on my channel. I'm willing to have a debate. I'm willing for you to make your argument. I will, treat you respectfully. I will not, assume that you're coming at this with a bad moral framework, maybe a faulty logic framework. But again, that's something that we can talk about. So if you want to, I have an open mind, just not empty, not to the point that I'm going to suspend reality. So make your case. I'm totally here for it. Also, just a side note, what I say, or what I again, let's see here. I don't know how to say this. Look, I'm not an internet drama channel. I may fundamentally disagree with the lens through which, let's say, other creators see certain cases. Uh, but my words are my own. So if I said something and you have a problem with it, then please contact me. And regardless of what I say on other people's channel, again, address it with me. You know, that's all I ask. I'm not going to apologize for what I said or my observations, but I am going to apologize that it happened on Expert's channel and might affect Baker going forward. So again, if anyone has an issue with anything that I said yesterday, please take it up with me. I don't even know. Now, someone thought that maybe it was Paul's wife or the family. So that's basically what we're going to be doing today. So I am going to go with a bit of a story time. Again, this is kind of going to be a breakdown if people have been busy with other trials. I know that the Faust trial is going on in Georgia and other trials. So, people might want to look at the closing arguments. So I will be cutting this up into a video, kind of like a story time, but also if you want a condensed Cliff Notes version of what went on, starting with the incident to kind of what we have gone through during the trial and now where we stand with the defense. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. I am kind of here to do that. So what drew me to this trial, the Paul Caneiro trial, was the fact that I had very early when I got hurt, I had watched that chapter about the Paul Caneiro case. And that was about 3-4 years ago. Jason J., you missed weaponized biohazard level stupidity. We'll pull some clips, but let me get my story time done so my soul can get a little bit of a breather first. So I had heard this story, and Mike over at that chapter does a really wonderful job of breaking down this particular case. And he does bring in some more hearsay elements. And this is where I think that there is a bit of a gap between people who mainly focus on the true crime storytime aspect to the people that do watch the trials. And especially if you are if you are transitioning from that zone of true crime into trial watching, it can be a bit confusing as to why some of the things that you might have heard in a true crime podcast or in, on a Netflix special or things like that, why some of that isn't brought in. And I do think that there is a bit of a disconnect when you start watching trials that you don't understand hearsay can't be brought in, that there are rules, that there are procedures, that there are, steps, a vetting process by which evidence has to come in. So there is, I think, a big sort of learning curve when you first start watching trials, because in that chapter, we kind of learned some background things that I will be kind of pointing out were more from that chapter when I go through this story, or I'll point out what has been kind of true crime speculation, versus what evidence we've actually seen from the trial. So this all started in New Jersey in 2018, but it started many years ago with the Caneiro family, a family that had 3 brothers. Paul was the oldest brother, Keith was the middle brother, and Corey was the youngest brother. And there was only, about a year gap between Keith and Paul, but there was a 7-year gap between Keith and Corey. So it was always kind of, Paul and Keith against the world. They kind of buddied up. And Corey was, their little brother, but with everything that we've both seen in the trial and kind of heard from character witnesses from both the state and the defense, Corey was always sort of ancillary. It was always sort of a buddy duo between Paul and Keith. Now, uh, around 2018, there were a lot of changes going on in the Caneiro family at large, but in not only that, but in Paul and Keith's respective individual families. Now, Paul was married to Susan and they had two adult daughters. I'm not going to say their name. Look, I honestly try to keep families out of this. Uh, if if I don't have to, as much as I have kind of been irritated with the family's, uh, you know, lateness and entitled actions. Uh, cannot multi-stream. So basically, this was kind of a time of resetting priorities, resetting goals. Uh, Paul and Keith were co-owners of two businesses. However, the amounts that both owned were a little bit different. Now, Keith was the main owner, 90% owner, and Paul was 10% owner of the, on paper and in reality, more profitable company. Keith was responsible for attracting their last and, quite frankly, most profitable client at the end of the year. It didn't look like this main client was going to renew. The price was way too expensive. So they were just looking to change. And Keith reading the room. And now this is according to some more hearsay evidence from that chapter, but there is evidence kind of in speculation and more hearsay that Keith was aware that Paul was living beyond his means, that there was money that not only in the trust, which we'll come to later, so stick a pin into that, but in the business, there were some monetary shenanigans going on. And Keith was quite frankly tired of dealing with Paul's recklessness with money, with his constant, excuses and poor me. Paul had been, prior to 2018, had been in a car accident about 2 years prior, claimed disability, had disability insurance, but was kind of being allegedly a little shady. Now, again, this is more hearsay-ish evidence, but there are allegations that Paul basically put his salary to zero and his wife got paid his salary. So on paper, to disability, he could look poor. Now, these are allegations. They have not been brought in court, but this is read between the lines and more hearsay stuff that hasn't been brought in. Now, with this knowledge that the more profitable business was going to be, kind of shutting down, winding down, Keith had decided to kind of step back as he was in charge of the one client, but they kind of had it worked out in a system and he wasn't needed on site as much. So he decided to go back to school to continue to learn computer magicology. He wanted to, again, have something, a safety net for his family, but also not maybe be so intertwined with Paul as far as money, as far as working together, as far as Paul, kind of requiring monetary assistance at all times. It seems to be that Keith was tired of paying for Paul to live at the level to which he felt he should be accustomed. So there is that sort of underlying hearsay tension around this time. Now, the brothers also owned EcoStar, which was sort of a Terminex kind of eco-friendly bug removal company, and they owned that 50-50. Now, around this time, Terminex was looking to move into their area of New Jersey, And they were going to offer them about $800,000 to buy the franchise from them, so, they would have less competition locally. Now, Paul allegedly was supposed to be in charge of the books. Now, I do question why, if Keith was feeling this growing resentment, if there were troubles with money, why Keith would leave Paul in charge of negotiations with Terminex. Now, it could be as basic as, this is my brother, and I don't want to believe he would screw me over this bad. And that hope that someone will change, that someone inherently selfish will choose a different path, is incredibly human, and I can understand it. So, as much as from an outside observer, we can all look and say, if Keith was pissed off, if Keith knew, from experience that Paul was shifty with money, why did he keep giving him a second and second chance? And again, that hope is so so positive and so heartbreaking at the same time. It's, if you've known anyone with addiction, if you've known anyone who's maybe struggled with self-destructive behavior, and it's that little drop of hope that gives you strength, but also breaks your soul, drop by drop by drop, because there's always that possibility that maybe one day they'll wake up and it'll finally hit. It'll finally connect with them. It, and it can become poisonous after a while. It can really breed resentment. And I speak from a personal experience. So it can lead to so much anger. What started out as hope can kind of calcify into resentment and heartbreak, just because it's so poisonous to think, maybe this will be the day, maybe. And every day that it doesn't happen, it's just one more hurt, one more choice that they made where you weren't enough. And it can be very, very toxic. And it can be incredibly painful. So I do understand the human side of wishing, hoping that the brother that you had in your head is actually the brother that you have. Sometimes believe in people when they show you who they are is the hardest thing to accept. That honesty, that truth, that even if they were blood, you didn't matter to them as much as they mattered to you, is incredibly heartbreaking. And maybe he was in the beginning process of grieving that. Maybe he was in that cold place right before you decide that this is enough, that I can't do this anymore. I can't be the reason anyone stops or starts anything or is a better or a worse person. I can't. And maybe he was right on that knife edge of, I love you, but I can't be near you. I can't, you're toxic. Maybe that was it. Maybe he was at that first step of denial where you don't want to believe it. You don't want to acknowledge it. And it just sits there percolating in the back of your mind, slowly crystallizing into a boundary, a self-protective boundary that, look, I love you and I wish you were different, but the brother you are currently isn't one that's safe around my family. And if I could put my armchair psychology hat on, I think Paul expected Keith to be his ride or die. Paul expected from everyone complete and total loyalty and the ability to cater to his whims. I mean, he has a wife, he has a side piece. He is disabled, but he's still getting the money coming in. He is a great guy. He always has, barbecues. He always is, hanging out with his brother, but he's stealing from the trust fund. So it's a very interesting kind of Jekyll and Hyde, the mask. And what is interesting is that in very clever people that don't have emotions, people like Bundy, people like BTK, people like, let's see, um, oh gosh, what are other people that I'm thinking about that are fairly charming? Even the Night Stalker, to a certain extent, had this kind of superficial charm. It didn't last long, but it fooled people. It's the exact reason why Brian Koberger was the absolute worst person to try to get away with red rum, because he looks like central casting from creepyguy.com. I mean, of any work person, you wouldn't give the benefit of the doubt that maybe he did really break his arm and needs help taking, books to his VW Bug. Brian Koberger is not that man. He is not going to be able to charm and get a person alone. So it astounds me that a criminology student would not realize that he lacks the basic sort of suave or even superficial charm to be a Bundy. It is, again, this goes to my Tismy thing where people are weird. I would like to study them. So excuse my detour. But I think that Paul understood fundamentally, and that's why I remain that I don't know what it is about Sophia that bothered him so much. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. So I have no idea. But it is clear that the only person he is grieving, even superficially, is Jesse, his nephew. He did not cry at all during Sophia. He did not even cry at his brother's autopsy report. But we are getting off the track, so let me come back to the actual point where we were at. So again, things were kind of at flux for not only EcoStar, but Square One, the more profitable business. Now, Keith was finishing up his, advanced degree, but he was kind of, for all that things were changing and there was a flux in sort of where his future was going as far as, a new job and finishing up school, he had been forward planning and, to provide a safety net for at the time they started the trust, his wife and any future children. Keith went ahead and purchased a whole life insurance policy. Now, I'm not a financier by any chance, nor do I understand finance whole life trust. But basically, for the Cliff's Notes version, by some form of financial wizardry, you can basically pay into this whole life, term policy. And whenever you die, if you have, kept up with the payments, then you get the full benefit amount no matter what. Now, that being said, the contract for the Canada Life insurance was very clear that Keith and Jennifer planned to have the beneficiary go to either first a surviving spouse for the care of the children going forward, and then if both parents should tragically pass, then it would go to the children under a guardian. But there was also a contingency beneficiary line where basically Paul and Corey, the two other brothers, would be beneficiaries if all of Keith's family happened to pass. Now, the split with that would be $1.5 million for each brother. Now, 2018 was a bit of a rocky year for the brothers. Around April that year, Keith, with Keith getting this whole life term insurance, he also set up an irrevocable trust. Now, an irrevocable trust in New Jersey requires that someone other than the sort of guarantor or the holder of the assets be in charge of this trust. He appointed his brother. And it was around 2018 that, Keith was sitting down with his accountant, and they started getting, around April, some very odd messages from Canada Life Insurance. Now, they were set up on a quarterly payment plan. So every 4 months, or every 3 months, they had to pay like $8,700 for this policy. And it was kind of a coincidence that Keith even found out, because since Paul is sort of the trustee, all of the bank statements are supposed to go to Paul rather than to Keith. But for some reason, Keith was able to get a hold of a statement and a sort of past due notice from Canada Life. Now, Keith talks to Paul, and Paul's like, I don't know, I've been sending the money. And this goes on for about a week or so. Then Paul finally says, you know what? I'm an idiot. I accidentally mixed my two TD Ameritrade or America Bank, things or accounts, and I accidentally paid a good chunk of money to my student loans. What an idiot am I? I really need to pull my head out of my tuchus. I'm going to pay you back as soon as I get my pay from the businesses. I am so sorry. I will pull, my head firmly out of my bottom. I'm sorry, And so I am imagining that Keith is not feeling as great about his brother right now, but is like, okay. And to be fair, it appears that Paul pays back the money. In fact, the balance that he took plus interest does go back into the trust account for about 2 days, and then it's pulled out again. And not another payment is made to Canada Life Insurance after that point. Now, Paul gets a little bit smarter, though. Paul is a genius, if you will. In fact, that will be one of the core tenets of the defense, so stick a pin in that. But Paul is a smart guy, and he has Canva. So he decides, I can't, I have to make this look legit. I have to at least appear like I'm sending money to Canada Life. So he starts doctoring the bank statements that he gives both Keith and the accountant. And, I don't know how this happens, but he's able to get away with this until about November. And then again, I am not sure what triggered this, if it was 2 of these quarters going by without getting a payment. And again, Keith is like, I can see the Canada Life, I can see the amounts going out, everything is good. Now, there was a bit of, stupidity in these bank statements, because even an electronic transfer to a business is going to have like a routing number and all the numbers. You've seen them on your bank statements. Well, Paul is a Canva genius, so he decided to just say Canada Life Insurance, but not have any, transfer codes or anything like that. So it was enough to fool a, brother who wanted to trust him and an accountant who had been with the Caneiro family for many years. So again, didn't want to believe the worst. Maybe didn't look into things, but again, assumed that all of the past shenanigans with the money had been an honest mistake until November the 18th. It comes to the attention of the accountant and Keith by way of communication from Canada Life Insurance that despite having all of the proof on these bank statements, Canada Life says not only have they not received, any money since April, but due to this policy size, there is sort of a loan that they take out to keep the premiums current. So not only that, but he had missed 2 payments and he was going to get charged this loan and APR to cover the payments that had been missed. Now, as you can imagine, Keith starts out concerned, but he has these statements. So he talks to the he talks to the accountant. And then he brings in their insurance agent. Like, you guys, we don't get it. We've looked at the statements. We've got these statements saying the money is going to Canada Life, but Canada Life is saying not no money. And, Keith probably has this sinking feeling in his stomach that Paul's at it again, but maybe he wants to give him the benefit of the doubt. So Keith spends half the day until almost 3 p.m. Trying to figure this out himself. And he finally calls Paul. And he calls Paul's house phone, his landline, and his wife says, "Look, sorry, Paul's asleep." And Keith's like, "Look, and you can tell he's trying not to freak out. He's trying to hold that benefit of the doubt kind of feeling. But this is, again, we'll get to the trial, but it has been proven with evidence, with receipts, that Paul stole $78,000 from the trust. So he stole from his family, and that's going to be important. Again, take 94 other pins out of your voodoo doll and stick a pin in that one. So we go forward, and at 3, he's Paul's wife says, "Look, sorry, he has he's having a migraine, he's taking a nap, can I have him call you back?" And Keith, again, as much as the defense has tried to claim that he was a hothead, that he would fly off the handle, he's like, fine. You can tell he's exasperated. You can tell that he wants her to go wake him the hell up because this is important, but he's willing to let his brother sleep for a little bit because he thinks, okay, maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. 2 hours later, Keith calls again because, it is now pissing him off. This is his future. This is his family's security. This is his security as he tries to navigate into this new employment opportunity. This is, just as he's getting to where their finances are no longer going to be entangled, maybe he can set up boundaries. Maybe they can have a more healthy brother relationship without money between them. So maybe he's thinking this is just the light at the end of the tunnel. Look, it's the one last dump truck full of bullshit I have to deal with from Paul, and then we're good. But no. Around 6 p.m., he calls Paul again, and Paul pretend that he's just so sleepy, and he does not know. He's just so out of it with this migraine or whatever. He doesn't know his internet logon for the trust. He has no idea. He doesn't know it's 123 password or anything like that. It is just beyond his fig Newton of imagination. He can't get it together. And Keith is now noticeably upset. And I would say that I will give props to the state, again, especially after Uvalde, for being so measured, so respectful, so subdued in how they have presented these victims, how they have given them dignity, how they haven't used these victims as a parade of emotional heartstring pullers. It has been polar opposite of the Uvalde case in just as horrific a case, but the state hasn't used it, and they so could. They so could. But they didn't. They don't have to sink to that because they have facts. Now, At that point, Keith is upset and he does start yelling. He does start saying, Paul, you need to pull your head out of your ass. You've got 2 hours. And then I'm figuring this out myself. You've got 2 hours. Call me back. Man up. Basically, if you're lying, we're having to come to Jesus. And the most heartbreaking thing, and again, the state did nothing. That's what makes it so much more poignant. That what makes it so much more heartbreaking, so much more impactful, is that during these phone calls where you can hear this man attempting to make his brother confess, just admit what he did. Yeah, you're a schmuck, you're a piece of crud for stealing from your family, but he's giving his brother a chance to man up and say, you know what, I've been kind of a schlemiel. I stole money from you. I am living beyond my means. I am trying to fill a deep emptiness in my soul. I have envied you and others who worked hard. Instead of doing any of that, instead of any introspection, he does none of that, and in the background of these calls, you can hear those precious children and Jennifer just being a family, just being normal. And the horrifying, sad, and just tragic thing is, in less than a few hours, these people are gonna be gone, and not quickly, not peacefully, not, you know, surrounded by family, but, uh I'm not sure, Mimi's in the house. I would wonder if, again, if we got more honest character witnesses of the reality of Paul, would we learn that his jovial, kind, intelligent, man about the neighborhood personality is his mask? That it's like his Bundy's unique, kind of glossy charm, but very superficial? Would we learn that he has a history of using people, of manipulating people, of thinking of people as tools to get what he wants? I don't know. I think it would be interesting to do a deeper dive into his, kind of upbringing, because of all 3 brothers, it seems like Keith and Corey have gone on to live relatively normal lives. So what was it that made this emptiness in Paul, that he tried to fill it with, keeping up with the Joneses, living beyond his means, having an affair, stealing from his family, justifying all of this? How did that happen? And then how did it graduate to actual in your face, horrific, ugly, real life murder? I don't know. And I I I sometimes wish I would go back to school for psychology, but I also worry that I would fall into the trap that this could be a puzzle solved, that if we just isolate the factors that, a bad childhood or this or that. And the sad thing is that we can apply logic every day, all day to all things. And not gonna lie, I'm probably 90% Vulcan. But the truth is evil doesn't need a reason. It only needs a direction. It only needs a moment. It only needs that one moment where you decide, I deserve this more than he does. And that's my justification. Or I don't want to face up to everyone thinking I'm a stealer, or Keith's never going to pick me and he's going to pick his family. He's going to leave me in the dirt. He's abandoning me. I do wonder if, there was something about Sophia in one of the last communications, maybe that something that hasn't been caught, because Paul had a special hatred for this little girl that I will never understand. I don't understand it. Uh, and as crocodile as I think his tears are, I do think that in whatever level that he is capable of feeling, Paul does feel remorse for Jesse. Now, I don't know why Jesse, maybe he had always secretly wanted a son. Maybe he wanted Sophia to be a boy. Maybe he wanted, Jesse to have a brother like he did. And maybe Keith and Jennifer were only going to have 2 kids. So there was never a possibility that Jesse was going to have the brother relationship that that Paul felt he should have. Because Paul loved Jesse because he was an extension of himself. He was the firstborn boy. Jesse was the firstborn boy. So it's not so much that Paul uniquely loved Jesse. Paul loved the parts of Paul that he saw in Jesse, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a doctorologist, y'all. I am just spitballing here. So take everything I say with a big old packet of salt. I'm just spitballing. I'm a twice college dropout who is an intense people watcher from the age of 5. I tend to like to figure us out because we make no logical sense. And I say this as a person who has emotions and they affect my actions too. So I am a hypocrite. I do understand that I am as well a chaotic mix of both logic and chaos. So I say all that to say I'm just spitballing here. But I do think that's a likely possibility I can find no other logical reason why he would be so mad at Sophia unless he felt as though he was robbed of another brother experience. And again, it wouldn't have, even if it had been a little boy, even if Sophia had been Sam, I don't think it would have mattered. I don't think it would have stopped it. I don't. I don't think it would have been a limiting factor, but I don't think we would have seen the ferocity. But again, I'm just spitballing. But again, around 6, Keith leaves an ultimatum. Call me back by 8, give me the GD, LinkedIn or the log on, we need to figure this the F out. Paul, you need to pull your head out of your ass. You got till 8. And sadly, Paul couldn't find his balls, but he could sure find vengeance. He could sure find justification. So Keith probably went to bed, feeling overwhelmed, stress and everything. And, the house, Keith's house shut down, normal evening, kind of end of the night. And everything is pretty normal. It was a normal evening, everything was pretty normal until around 2 a.m. Well, actually 1 a.m. if we want to start the timeline right, because 1 a.m. is the time that Paul's phone shuts off, but is connected to a charger. It's also about the time that 2 very important for a little bit later in our story time, 2 cameras in his house, one in the unfinished basement area and one in his garage go off. Now, unbeknownst to Paul, when you do have an interruption in service in these particular security systems, you do get kind of a little like, hey, jackass, your security is on the fritz thing, email. Now, again, defense, I would just like to point out again, you said on record, your client is super smart, super serial smart, and not a moron. He, in fact, according to all of the defense witnesses thus far, was a technology wizard, a techling, if you will, had set up all of their computer screens, their security systems. When they started making the Commodore 84, computer, he was right there to load Oregon Trail for you. But he forgot that this feature was on camera because a Paul in his bald spot. Now, I know I've told you to keep a lot of pins places, but take one more out of that voodoo doll and put a pin in the fact that, you know, Paul daggone it. All right, we should be back, hopefully. Yeah, I think it's the cold and the fact that we need, not a temporary power box, but the new power box dealy thing. Now, I know I've told you to keep a pin on a lot of things, but I want you to remember, and I will remind you on our tour of shenanigans that is the shit show of a true crime case, but also the trial, at least for the defense's part. Do remember that Paul has a little bit of a bald spot right about here. It'll be important. Now, we get to see his little bald spot. Well, Paul may have accounted for in his genius super evil megamind plan on both his security cameras and Keith's security cameras, but he didn't take into account that we've basically become 1984 for ourselves, and everyone has their own personal big brother right in front of their doors, so no one steals their Amazon packages. So we get to see a series of uh, Ring doorbell cameras and security cameras of Paul taking, a little trip without his cell phone. And we see him go out of his neighborhood. And then, isn't it a weird thing? But Keith and Paul live about 20 minutes away. And holy crap, now Paul, just like Brian Koberger, decided to drive a super unique car in the middle of the night where no other cars are, giving us really clear views of a white Porsche Macan matching the description of Paul's car, turning into the very long driveway of the Keith Caneiro household. We can actually see this through multiple things. Now, around 2:20 to 16-ish, 2:30, we we see a light coming on and off, and we learned in the trial that that particular light by the garage near the auxiliary generator and the power company power box and meter, uh, there was a automatic light that would go on for motion, and there were also several cameras that would, pick up things from inside the garage. Now, the garage had a couple unique features. It was glass and cement. Keith's house was big, it was bougie. He did have land. Again, there was a noticeable difference in the wealth and lifestyle of Keith versus Paul. Paul was still comfortable. Paul had a very respectable house, a very respectable, backyard, and kind of a upper middle class lifestyle. Look, I'm not from New Jersey. I don't know if they live in the bougie, like, Target area or the Walmart Great Value area, but his Paul's neighborhood looked like it was well maintained, early late 90s, mid to late 90s, houses, kind of that siding and that brick border on the bottom, those kind of genre houses. So again, Paul was in no way the pauper or the poor relation or anything like that, unless he wanted to live like Keith, unless he compared himself to Keith. And then I do think he did that and he was never satisfied. But back to our timeline. Now, the state was able to download these videos from the garage, but if you're just kind of going on the timeline, whoever Paul drove his car to a neighbor's adjacent driveway, and he sort of squirreled his way onto Keith's property. Now, I'm guessing this was actually strategic because, oh no, is it doing it again? Squab Bob? But we are treated to actual video footage of someone with dark hair and a bit of a bald spot in front of this frosted garage glass door. Now, Keith's house is more of a modern style, so it's a lot of cement and kind of modern angles, wonky. It is not my jam, y'all. If Keith and Jennifer were happy in the house, it was their jam, then I hope that they had wonderful memories in this house, but it wasn't my jam. Now, the construction, being what it was, more cement and modern, is going to play a part later on. Now, Paul was privy to a lot of what went on in Keith's, life, including to kind of upgrades to their various houses. Paul was aware that Keith had a backup generator that was also kind of connected to the solar panels. Now, obviously, it's the middle of the night, but Paul does something, and we can kind of see this figure going back and forth. It is important to note that both Keith and Corey Caneiro, keep a pin in this, were both bald AF. Keith was a bald, he was bald, y'all, just bald, all right, with my complexion. And Corey had a very, very tight fade, kind of a buzz fade. Now, Paul was the only one who had a full head of dark hair except for this, minoxidil spot right here. Now, you would think that this would be enough to make the client choose a plea deal. But according to the defense, this is all a conspiracy, and we don't even know if that's Paul or Corey. Because, don't listen to your lying eyes, and your brain is not for thinking, dum-dum. Consume product. Enjoy product, consume new product. Don't think about it. It's the J.J. Abrams philosophy of law and logic. Anyway, the sad thing, and again, the state has been incredibly measured, and I would encourage you, you don't have to watch the autopsy or the autopsy reports and the medical examiner to get these big emotional punches in the trial. I would recommend, if you kind of want to get a feel for how restrained the state has been, look at the video footage from the garage. Because, at least for me, it was that growing terror, that growing dread. And I know I can't stop anything. It's the same feeling I feel when I watch Seven, and I always want Brad Pitt to be the beggar person. But I can understand the desire to maybe red rum Kevin Spacey, if I'm honest. So I'm always conflicted at the end of the movie. But you see this countdown, and every minute that passes, every second, we are closer to this family no longer existing. And again, it is so poignant and impactful because it doesn't have to be spelled out for you. The state expects and respects both the jury and the audience, maybe the public at large, because while they are proving beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury, they're also making the case to us. That jury, while it does, technically and rightfully represent the people of New Jersey, the people who were most locally affected, the state is also proving to us, the citizens by which we allow the state this enormous power to remove someone's freedom. Because I think we've shown with Karen Reed, when this doesn't happen correctly, regardless of where you stand on the other nebulous stuff going on in the Karen Reed case, at the bottom of it was a government who was trying to imprison a woman who they couldn't prove did anything wrong. It was David versus Goliath, and prosecutors are learning that you no longer have, a dark night where you can hide these things. There are enough of us out there that will do the independent research, that will bring this to light, not because we want, red rummers to go free, or we're making excuses for Karen Reed, or we hate police officers, or we believe that John O'Keefe shouldn't get justice. Quite the opposite, in fact. We yearn for justice too. For every family who has had that terrible knock on the door, we want justice. But what justice isn't is finding whoever is a warm body to take the blame. So I believe that the state has done a wonderful, wonderful job. They could have gone ham. They could have marched every single one of these kids' teachers in and explain how the loss of this child, what these children were like. They could have marched in every single one of Jennifer's friends. They could have marched in every one of Keith's friends. They could have paraded Corey around. They could have had no thought or care of the only brother left behind, that they were willing to use him as a witness just to disprove the defense's ridiculous theory. And the Uvalde prosecutors would have done all that and more. So it is a hard trial, but if you guys haven't watched it, that is one of the more poignant times in the trial that really is one of those times where you're just like, why the hell are we here, Paul? Why did you not take a plea deal? One sec. My son was like, I got a prismatic in Roblox. If anyone knows what that means and could translate in the chat, that would be super helpful, because I was like, that sounds awesome. I have no idea what a prismatic is. So I did have to take a break because youngest most feral was very proud of himself. Back to the story. So again, in the footsteps of Sue Opper and Eyebrow Daddy from the Darrell Brooks case, they have done a very restrained job. They have wanted to focus on the facts. They have wanted to keep this as streamlined for the jury as they can, given that it's such a big case. So I have been very impressed by the state. So as your heart starts sinking, you hear these bangs and these clanks, and you know that Paul is out there dismantling the electric box and the backup generator. And you see the start, going down, and you just know that this is. He could have said, okay, I am a total schmuck. Why am I here? What am I doing? You see this figure pacing back and forth, and at no time does he stop. You actually get this very eerie feeling that he might be inside the house, inside the garage. You can hear someone breathing in the garage. I don't like scary movies, to be honest with you. I think most of the, actors and actresses seem to act fully stupid when faced with horror, which, fair point. Yeah. Crazy if frickin' Marilyn Manson dressed as a nun, did a jump scare on me, I'm not, acting normal, but I'm also not running and tripping and then being like, "Oh, yeah." No, this is Appalachia, sweetheart. We are strapped it till we are clapped. So, I'm just saying, I would be startled, but then I'd play back. Anywho, so again, the state has been so restrained, and that is what gets you emotionally. That is a mature use of emotion. It allows the juror, it allows the watcher to sit in their feelings, to put themselves in that perspective, to feel the intrusion of the victims, to imagine yourself asleep in your house and someone is in there breathing in your garage and you have no idea. Someone's banging on your house. And because of the sort of wonky construction and kind of awkward angles and the exterior being mostly cement, Paul was able to be quite loud, getting all this stuff done, and they weren't aware. So it is so incredibly eerie and a juxtaposition because we hear this loud bangs, and it's almost like you've got that eerie experience and you kind of, startle a little bit yourself if you're me, and the family is not aware. And if you're me or if you're someone that can put themselves into another person's perspective, it's terrifying. It is every parent, every homeowner's nightmare, every person's nightmare. The place where you're supposed to be the safest, your home, your fortress of solitude is not only invaded, but invaded by someone who knows all its secrets that you've let in. The fox among the hen house. Uh, it was a powerful moment for me. And then we get to the terrible moment where the the camera's cut off and we know what's about to happen. Now, the state has done a really good job of giving us all the evidence, but there are some things that we will never know unless Paul speaks. It is very clear that Paul disabled not only the electrical company box, but the generator to lure Keith out. Now, Keith and Paul both shared a gunsmithing and uh, force multiplier collection and kind of hobby. So he most likely knew that Keith was going to come out strapped, or get clapped. Now, there have been sort of allusions to the fact that Paul's go bag that was found by the police in his wife's car uh, was did have a FLIR or a infrared camera. And welcome, Baker Raiders. We are kind of doing a long form story time of the Paul Caneiro case. And then for the first time ever, I'm going to be kind of debuting my alternate ending because this family deserves it. So I will be clear to point out in the story time what has been proven by the state in trials, what is more hearsay from maybe true crime stuff prior to this going to trial, and where the defense disagrees with these things. And welcome, Prince of Wales, and let's see, Boosh. All right. So the power goes off in Keith's house, and it's this heartbreaking moment that you realize that there is no stopping Brad Pitt from, ending Kevin Spacey at the end of Seven. The die has already been cast. This has already happened before, and there is no rewind. So what the state has gathered and proved is that According to, again, logic and just fact patterns, Keith went outside to, again, check, protect, and defend his family because he had this backup generator. It should have been on, set, and ready to go, even if they experienced a power, blip or delay. And again, heartbreakingly, tragically, Keith texted his brother at around 3:14 and 3:15 a.m. saying, "Hey, my generator is gone. The power is completely effing out. I'm going to go look at the generator." If you remember, Paul has turned off his phone but kept it in or charging at his home. According to the medical examiner, Keith Caneiro was shot 5 times. The first shot, although this is more labeling from the medical examiner, not an actual sort of chronological outline of which shot was fired first, other than due to his experience, and this is the chief medical examiner for all of New Jersey. Keith was the first shot, according to him, based on his wealth of experience, was a shot in the lower back top butt, kind of the muffin top. If you used to wear super low-rise jeans, the top butt, the upper bubble of a muffin top, kind of there. That bullet went all the way through his body, ricocheting up his chest, actually kind of came out of his shoulder. And since Keith fell down immediately when he was shot, through his shoulder and through his hand and then out of his hand. The rest of the shots on Keith were on his head. Now, I will caution you greatly. The autopsy, the day that we did the autopsies, day 14, there were 4 of them because this is a quadruple homicide. For the first time ever since I started watching trials, Court TV showed a lot of the photos. So do be prepared for that. I was not quite prepared for that. Now, if you are the type that do enjoy seeing the photos, I will say they were cleaned up in as much as they could be. They were very respectful. None of them showed faces unless they were showing Keith and force multiplier wounds. Basically, Keith's wounds were here, 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 and there was one right here. They can tell that these were after because the force of the energy imparted from the freedom seeds pushed his mouth, his teeth into the ground. Now, we're going to go with a couple different characters here. Now, there was a neighbor that heard these 5 gunshots go off in the Colts Neck bougie neighborhood and did call 911, not once, but twice, because he was sure, as he put it, someone got whacked. And he was so concerned about this that he called 911 not once, but twice because he didn't feel like they were taking it seriously. And like we learned from the Uvalde case, this particular witness was about 2 miles as the crow flies away from Keith Caneiro's house. But it's very hard in rural areas or areas with different, topography to really figure out through audio, kind of just human ears where a gunshot is going off. So the police, the local Colts Neck police, did look around, but didn't see anything. And possibly the cruelest twist of fate, if they could have, that sort of wistful could have, would have, should have, that didn't happen. So the Colts Neck police, went back to their general patrolling and, in the morning that that neighbor had actually called the police again to see if there had been any sort of conclusion. And the dispatch kind of blew him off. They were like, we haven't heard anything. We did check it out, that. Now, from what, again, we don't know the order by which this happened, though as a mom, this is what I'm going to say happened next. So Jennifer, probably hearing these gunshots very close, in time to when her husband said he was going out to check on the power, seemed to have come downstairs from the master bedroom, and she seemed to have been attacked in the front foyer area. She had evidence of not only a gunshot wound to the head that probably did not take her life immediately, but also, I believe, 5 stab wounds. In an insult to injury and irony that just breaks your heart, Paul seems to have gotten the knife or the bladed weapon from a butcher block in the Caneiro kitchen, with the brand name Saboteur. It was a butcher knife. Now, a combination of all of these wounds and the gunshot, she bled out fairly quickly. She was probably dead very quickly. Paul was, I believe, 6'1" and 200 pounds, and Jennifer she looked tall for a woman, but definitely in no way able to fight off an attack in the dark while she's disoriented from a person that was her brother-in-law for years and years. And then we get to the heartbreaking stuff, and I will try to clean this up as much as possible, because it broke me a little bit Wednesday, or a lot of it, to be honest. It seems then that Paul went after his nephew, Jesse, and Jesse put up one hell of a fight, but again, he was an 11-year-old boy against a monster with a knife, and sadly also a force multiplier. Jesse had a gunshot wound here, and though it broke his jaw, it didn't go further into the sort of brain cavity to where it would have been an instant passing away. He was then stabbed multiple times, and I'll get to the rest later. Paul then found Sophia, little Sophia, his 8-year-old niece. Now, if you imagine that the foyer is here and there's a staircase with a little landing and then up, Sophia's body was found on the landing, and we're going to come back because it will make more sense why we're coming back to this in a little bit. Now, Paul, thinking he had taken care of all of this, had another thing to do, because now he's got 4 bodies in his mind and a bunch of evidence that they didn't die naturally. Now, whether he researched or not, he decided to go downstairs, and again, being kind of everyone's tech support, he was able to know which security systems had fiber optic cables that would alert local first responders to a fire and would also power the fire alarms. He disabled those, cut the cords, and started a slow burning fire in a cedar lined storage closet. I think it was like a bougie wine closet, and left the house. Now, again, Paul, being super smart and disabling the ring cameras for both Keith's house and his own house, was super duper smart, but he didn't think about everyone else having a ring camera. So his Porsche Macan is seen hauling ass from his brother's house and heading back into his neighborhood, and then parking in his driveway. Now, in a coincidence of coincidence, or maybe according to the defense, a conspiracy, Wouldn't you know, in the oddest thing ever, lightning doesn't strike twice, but, buy a lottery ticket around 4:30, 4:45, again, with the absolute ridiculous thought that no one else is going to have Ring cameras, especially the multi-camera array that you decided to do for your back neighbors. There all of a sudden, and oh my god, a fire breaks out in the window well very near to the gas line of Paul's house. And even odder, it appears to be a suspiciosus fire because a gas can was used to try to light another fire very near the garage and the Porsche Macan. Oddly enough, that was the only car that had gasoline poured on it that seemed to have been attempted to be vandalized at all. Now, lucky for Paul, while he did unplug the video cameras for his security system, he didn't disable his fire alarm. Well, lucky or unlucky or just plain stupid, you decide. But lucky for Paul or unlucky for Paul, he was able to be the hero, get his entire family out of the house, and for reasons that we couldn't figure out at this time in the trial when we're looking at this video of him going he's gotten his family out of this fire, okay? I want you to remember that. But he has to go back to get the Porsche Cayenne out of the garage. As you do, you want to make sure you get one of your leased cars out of the garage. Well, the first responders show up within, I think, 8 minutes of this alarm. And this is in this area, in this part of New Jersey, a lot of the fire crews are going to be volunteer fire crews. They are going to be people, your local neighbors, things like that. So local firefighters and then the actual, paid company comes out and they are able to put out these fires fairly quickly. There's still a good deal of, fire damage, but they were able to put it out. And because of the melted gas can and, all the sus arson look of the thing, because of the way that New Jersey is kind of set up, it's very much like Massachusetts, where the DA's office handles major crimes. So they send out major crime investigators because this looks all the sus. All the sus. I mean, you've got the melted gas can, you've got the fact that this fire was started very near a gas line. It just, none of it makes sense. It was also started directly underneath the master bedroom. Now, we learned during the trial that Paul not only has a side piece, a Colombian side piece, a friend with condo benefits, if you will. But according to Paul and his wife, Susan, she knew about it. She was okay with it, as you do. You're totally okay with your husband spending money you don't have, money that he's stealing on his side piece. I mean, doesn't everyone? But do keep in mind that Susan slept in the master bedroom and Paul slept in the spare bedroom. And coincidence of coincidences, should that fire have instantly exploderated like Paul probably thought it would work because he's only thought about science in like MacGyver, he was trying to take out his wife. Allegedly in Minecraft, that's just my speculation. Not that she's not making him pay for it by putting him in the most ridiculous Garanimals for adults sweater sets I have ever seen, to include a poop brown one with a baby poo, like yellow shirt. She wants him all the guilty. So it's around noon that everything gets figured out. The fire is fully suppressed. And the officers are like, hey, this is all the sus. Would you mind greatly, coming with us, looking at, because they noticed the security cameras, they pulled the security cameras and say, hey, could you just come to the police office, It's really weird. Do you have any enemies? That kind of thing. So we can start this investigation. Now, all the while that they're doing this, the, DA's office investigators are starting to process the scene at Paul's house. And as the basement is deemed safe, they are able to go in there. And I do encourage you, if you want to see a really thorough investigation, yes, it's tedious. Yes, we have been here for 15 daggone days. But the state did an awesome freaking job on this investigation. They didn't leave a stone unturned. They found evidence. They tested evidence. They had an organization between two different scenes that was amazing. So again, in this trial, we've had the first responders, we've had the police at this scene, and we've also had the police that were at the station as Paul's family drives the Porsche Cayenne to the station. And it's about at the end of this kind of questioning, hey, do you know anyone that has grudges against you? Did you piss off the mafia, the Bratva, I don't know, the Irish? Just normal questions, I'm sure. That one of the investigators was pulling up, since this happened in Monmouth County, he was pulling up the Monmouth County blotter. He does this as kind of like what calls have come in, this, that, and the other. And he realizes, looking at this, that there is another Caneiro house ablaze. And simultaneously at this time, the Colts Neck Police Department have received a call from a neighbor of Keith Caneiro's. They share a landscaper, and the landscaper said, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's some smoke coming up from from Keith's house. Was he going to do a burn pit or something today?" And again, this is more rural, so this is something that's kind of ubiquitous in my hillbilly neck of the woods. So I love that even rich, bougie New Jersey has hillbilly burn pits. There's a little bit of Appalachia in all of us. And again, I want you to remember that most of the first responders at the Colts Neck, at the Keith Caneiro scene, there were two police officers, because when the neighbor finally went to go check with the landscaper, they did come across Keith's body out in the open near the generator face down. And they did, try to see if the front door was open, but they were seeing smoke. And then the police came up, and this is 2018, so the Colts Neck Police Department did not have body cams at that time, but we did get to see the dash cams for the first responding officers in Colts Neck. And then we see the firefighters come in, and the firefighters and first responders were made aware by the neighbors that there were 3 other people that were not accounted for. Now, the fire had gone from this lined cedar closet kind of in a smoldering fashion. Basically, it wasn't getting enough oxygen to fully engulf anything. It was more of a smoldering heat. But as that heat built up and built up, it started going up and burning through the ceiling, burning through the stairs in the basement. And unfortunately, because of where Jennifer's body was located, she was burned beyond recognition. Now, in a small mercy, and due to the autopsy or the medical examiner's testimony, it was proven by lack of soot in her lungs and lack of carbon monoxide that she had passed away quite quickly after all her wounds and didn't feel any of this. Now, once the first responders and the firefighters realized that they were probably dealing with a crime scene, they were trying to deal with this fully engulfed fire. It went from kind of zero, you could kind of see smoke, to this house was was very, very much damaged to the point of almost complete collapse in certain areas with the fire. Now, it c the when they realized that this was going to be a crime scene, the, again, major homicide units, the major crime unit from the DA was, initiated, and they were given a lead detective, and then both crime scenes had not only their local lead detective, but the DA's office, investigator lead detectives. And at that point, the choice was made to leave everyone where they were because we wanted to preserve the scene. The police and the firefighters knew that we had something here, we needed to protect it for a future possible trial. And that was sort of the, idea. Now again, remember that these are volunteers. These are locals. They may not have known, Keith by name, but they've maybe seen him in the local Target, the Walmart, the Aldis. Maybe they, get their kids go to school together. I don't know how big Colt's Neck is, but these are people that were just regular people who decided to serve their community. So even though it had been decided to leave everyone where they were, um, unless or until the structure was considered too unstable, if it was considered too unstable, basically we would try to get pictures of where everyone was, but we would have to remove the people. Now, again, if you want a very poignant, very, very emotional testimony that is not gratuitous, is not exploitative. The testimony of the firefighter who, during a kind of blind search where it's so dark, it's so smoky that they are literally going one left, one right, walking their hands along the wall. One of these gentlemen came across little Sophia, and even though he'd been told not to pick her up in a very human, very understandable, instinct that I think anyone would have a hard time. He thought maybe he had seen something, some breath movement, something, and he was gonna get this little girl out. He was gonna save her if he could. So Sophia was brought out, and then, the fire was getting pretty well started. It was getting unsafe, and the decision was made to bring out, both Jesse, who was found in the kitchen, and Jennifer. Now, because of the sort of overriding, scene command of the DA's office, there was a good deal of coordination, between the medical examiner and the investigators. They basically had teams of people investigating that night forward, and you've gotta remember, this is now November 19th. They worked, took Thanksgiving off, and then came right back the next day. That's how dedicated they were to getting justice. So, the state kind of so, basically, that is it. Now, Paul banked on his house exploderating because in his basement, because of the sort of, again, ability for the DA's office to call in different, assets, as soon as they are learning that this is a quadruple homicide and they're starting to see some sus things in the basement and some sus things in the semi-burned Porsche, Macan, they have Officer Goodboy, Officer Creed, come in because he is awesome, and he also got a CV at detecting, traces of a cadaver. And despite Paul's best effort, this plastic amalgamated hump, kind of clump in the middle of the basement survived. And the investigators are like, "What the hell is this?" But good boy Officer Creed was like, Uh, but excuse me, he is all the guilty. So he signaled at both these kind of amalgamated pile and in the Porsche Macan. Well, they had a person who, again, they had dedicated one person for both localities as the crime scene photographer and investigator. So one gentleman took all the pictures, he labeled all the evidence. He was in charge of, making sure that everything got photographed. He used to work in forensics at a police office, so he knew exactly how to bag and tag evidence. And that is going to become important because I will point out where the defense could have had cogent arguments. Not that they would do anything for them, but certain evidence could have been at least questioned. So they start processing this big giant clump of whatever it is. And it's wet, it's frozen, and they don't know what it is. So this, lead scene investigator is like, hey, let's try put down some paper in the garage, see if we can defrost this. And then he decided, no, you know what? This is all kind of clumped together. I want to get this to the trace lab. I want to get this to the crime lab. I want them to fiddle with it in a controlled environment to get all the evidence we need. Now, moving forward and kind of speeding up a little bit, in that clump of crap was found a pair of jeans that were Paul's size that were found to have mixes of blood or stains of blood that were from both Jesse and Sophia Caneiro, so his niece and nephew. Again, it struck me as very odd that the children's deaths were so up close and personal. Jennifer's was traumatic and violent, but we didn't see the level of carnage that with the parents that we did with the children, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what that I wish I had an answer to whatever the hell demonic that was, so we could stop it from ever happening again, but I don't know what kind of evil does that. But not only that, there were black nitrile gloves that were found to both inside and outside have a mixture of Paul and Sophia's DNA. There was a shirt that had Paul's DNA. There was a scarf, a Brooks Brothers scarf, because of course you're going to wear a Brooks Brother cashmere fucking scarf when you go annihilate a family. But one of the hairs matched Jennifer's. So when I say that the state has gone through 14 intense days of sometimes, and look, the state has had to put in not only this, I will say this case is unique in that the state has given a motive. It's given a financial motive of Paul's embezzlement from the trust. So not only did they have to prove this financial aspect, they had to prove this quadruple homicide. And in 14 days, they did it. And they ended on possibly one of the most moving witnesses I've ever seen. And I'm trying to get to the, here we go. Now, this is the medical examiner, but you are not going to hear any of the bad stuff from this. This is just the end, and I think it's very powerful because this man is the head medical examiner. This man, throughout his entire testimony, held it together. He was a consummate professional. He was polite. He was respectful. He was as professional and as honestly instructive, and he tried to translate the kind of incomprehensible jargon of medicine into something that wasn't condescending, but a layperson could understand. I want you this man has been a professional for so many years, and this is how he reacted at the end of his testimony. Make sure I have the volume on.
Did you document them on a body diagram of
For 10%, normally people
Sorry, I thought I was right at the
zillion of times, then leave the body alive.
All right, now this man has not banged anything. This man has not raised his voice. That bang was so loud in a very mild manner. Yes, certainly yes. This is the most passion that you've seen out of this man, and then he freaking breaks you. So have your hillbilly Kleenex ready because, y'all, it's not graphic, but it's gonna break your heart. So do be warned, it's only about a minute and a half that I've got here, but it's rough.
Leave the body alive.
Now, doctor, as a result of your autopsy, I would imagine that you concluded that Sophia Caneiro at age 8 wasn't suffering from any natural diseases that would have contributed to her death, correct?
Correct.
And with respect to your examination and based upon your training and experience, were you able to come up with a determination as to cause of death of Sophia Caneiro?
Yes, indeed.
And what was the cause of death that you concluded?
Sharp force injuries and smoke inhalation.
Again, as a result of your training experience and your autopsy of Sophia Caneiro, were you able to come up with a determination as to the manner of death?
Homicide.
Judge, I have no further questions.
Now, the defense, and probably the only smart move they've ever made this entire trial, did not decide to cross this man. But now I'd like to shift gears, if I could, just a little bit. And I've done this for every trial. It's kind of my daydream of what I wish had happened. And I don't share these because, again, I kind of explained it at the front of the stream, but my goal is never to make the victims' stories about me, and I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing any of these if they at all weren't something that the family was okay with. And I don't need to share these. Look, the world does not need to know my daydreams of what I wish happened enough to cause the families any hurt by maybe them not wanting these kind of, basically, I rewrite the end of the story. But I feel like this family deserves it. And I don't think Paul has had 4 people now talk for him, and I'd like to speak for the family if I could. So sit back, relax, imagine in another timeline. This is how everything ended. Paul was not having a good night, or not Paul, fuck Paul. I mean that literally and figuratively, allegedly in Minecraft, Gen Pop, justice for all. Keith wasn't sleeping well. It was that stress sleep that, you're in and out, you can't quite get comfortable. He was running the day through his head, and it was all too much. He knew he was coming to some sort of conflict or resolution with his brother, and he just couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. And it had just dogged his sleep the entire night, tossing and turning. And just about the time that he got to that part of the dream where that creepy hand behind you touches your shoulder. He woke up. And right at this time, kind of like miracles do in life, in a moment, subtle, quiet, not loud, there was a shift, just a little shift, subtle, again, like a whisper, like a shadow. But it was there. No one really noticed. And in that moment, Keith was like, I need to check on my family. And he looked over at his wife. She was sleeping. And as he looked at her, he realized he no longer felt stress. He really didn't feel worried. He wanted to go check on his kids like every parent wants to go check on their kids just to make sure that they can, slay the monsters in their closets and make sure they're breathing. That thing you do sometimes as parents when the kids are loud and fighting, and you just stand by their doorway and watch them sleep and remember this is why you do everything. But that fear, that terror, it kind of felt like a shadow now. That big lump, that big weight, it felt like an echo. He couldn't quite remember it, kind of how a dream just seeps out of your mind. And he was looking at his wife, and it was like he was seeing her for the first time. Again, without the stress, without the bickering, without the, hey, do you pick up the laundry? Do you pick out? He'd never felt this. This was like a life without all the little worries and dreams. And, it's still like you do when you're waking up. Those fragments, those shadows, that echo of terror, of fire, of pain, that bad dream that he had was still following him a little. Again, kind of fading out, but still there. So he looked at his wife, but he got up because, kids, dad, it's a thing. And he got up and he went to his son's room, and there were toys everywhere. But those little things, those toys everywhere, those socks in and out of drawers, the way his son was, lopsided in the bed, it was just peace. It was like its own little miracle watching his son happy, peaceful, in a place he'd provided, in a place that he'd worked his butt off. And he felt peace. And in that moment, he could see his son, all the moments that they would do together, that first fight over Axe body spray, that first fight about, you have to take a shower, explaining to him that he'd have to use deodorant, how to shave, how to drive, how to deal with his first broken heart and his first stolen hoodie, how he would say goodbye when he went to college and worry from afar, but hope that he had raised someone that would take the kicks that life took. And, knowing that he was maybe going to get a little dinged up, but he'd always have his dad there. He'd trip a little bit, but he'd be okay. And then, again, more scenes came forward. His son finding a woman he loved, bringing her home, seeing his son become a dad and a husband and a grandpa. And it was like this film just passed him. And again, all the little small things, all the little things that keep us up, that make us uncomfortable, that, bother us, they just didn't matter anymore. And he said, okay, this is good. I'm glad he's having a good dream. And he went to his little girl's room, and she was, in with all her stuffies. She was sleeping, there was a tiara and all sorts of stuff everywhere. And it was perfect. The toys were out, the things were a mess, but it was perfect. Perfect in the way that we often forget to notice. perfect in a way that we want to crystallize, that we don't realize we have until it's gone. And the same sort of film went past. He saw Sophia going through middle school, dealing with mean girls, being the one that reminded her that just because everyone else wasn't the same, didn't get her, that she'd always have a dad in her corner. He taught her how to be a good friend, a good partner, and she looked at her mom and dad and she watched their relationship, the give and take. So when she navigated through life, when she found her way to the right person, she made a good choice. She picked someone like her dad. And Keith marveled at all of these things they'd seen. You know, the movie of he and his wife having the kids go out, getting back to each other, and then the joy of becoming grandparents, seeing their children settle down and get a life of their own, to be invited back in. And Paul went back to sleep. Or not Paul, fuck you, Paul. Keith went back to sleep. So maybe the nightmare was the dream. Maybe it was the echo. And maybe that world before, the one where we have all of those annoyances, where we have all of that pain and distrust, and there are monsters that wear a human mask, maybe that was truly the dream, and this world was the reality. Okay, you guys, how was it? Because that's kind of what I do for every trial. I don't ever want to take anything from the victim. So, but I wanted to rewrite the story so much. And it didn't feel like anyone was speaking for the family, especially the cavalcade of morons that was yesterday. So again, I think I think the defense will, in their monumental stupidity, bring in their DNA expertologist on Monday, and then we will be looking at closing arguments on Tuesday as my guest. Oh, no, you're fine. You are fine. Like I said, I was more nervous in that this is not something I generally share with people, again, because I don't want it to be perceived as, because there are some people that it feels like they want to make the victim's story their own. And I don't want to be seen as doing that. And I don't ever want to do something that would hurt the family or they wouldn't want, out there. So I've generally not put those out, but this is kind of what I do for every trial. I definitely, like in my daydream story for Gannon Stalk and Madeline Soto, they end up getting kind of abducted into a land like Narnia moments before they pass in the real world. And they have various adventures and things like that. And then they end up getting together. Thank you so much, Rhinestone Wow Girl. As I said, it's just something that, and again, on a completely other note, and again, to this, I will not address it. I will not make drama about it anymore, other than to say, whatever I said last night, they are my words, and I do hope that everyone in the Karen Reed sphere still treats Expert and Baker with respect. I will stand behind my own words, but they were in no way Baker or Expert, so I know that they are more into the Karen Reed stuff. And while it's perfectly okay and I stand behind my comments, I don't want it to reflect on them. So there you go. And thank you. I need to find my pen. Where are my pens? Oh, there it is. So that's all I have to say. Again, I stand by my comments. I'm a big girl, but I I don't want my friends to pay for me having a hot take, is all. So, like I said, I'm a big girl. I stand by my stand, and I just don't want it to affect either of them. So, I mean, I'm not here for drama. I'm not in the Karen Reed sphere, but I do have a bit of a problem with certain points of view that are interesting. So that's all. I could foresee it becoming a big drama llama thing. And as I'm not a drama llama person, but I will own my words. Uh, like I said, I'm a big girl. If y'all have problems or with it on any side, I stand by my stuff. But just it's not my friends' stuff. So there you go. I just don't want any blowback on them. But there you go. I am probably going to break this up. This is my first kind of um, it's just the Melanie Little thing. I was trying to be more obtuse. I was trying not to talk about other creators, but here you go. If anyone has a problem with what I said about Melanie Little and my perception that she frames her arguments through the lens of feminism, those are my words and my thoughts, and I don't want you to take it out on Baker or Expert or anyone else in the Karen Reed sphere. Again, I stand by it. I have observed it, and my perceptions are okay, but what I don't want to do is in any way cause drama for my friends. Yeah, I know. It's more that I don't ever want people to see this as, again, y'all, YouTube is crazy, and sometimes I'm not a good peopler to begin with. I tend to say the tismy things that you're not supposed to say, and when my leg is hurting, I tend to be more filterless. So, what I will say is, in the scheme of things, in the big, giant scheme of things, it's not important. It's not important. I welcome if Melanie would like to talk to me. If I I welcome a discussion. I will engage with a good faith background. I will not assume any, moral judgment on our different perspectives. So that's where I'll leave it. We might have different points of view, but if we have a discussion, I am willing to come at it with good faith, and listen to it. My mind is open, just not empty, and that's all. So, like I said, I just would rather the blowback not come to my friends. So, as I say, this is an open invitation to any way that anyone that was, would like to challenge me on that. Just, I'm a grown woman. I stand by my words. So, if you would like to have a dialogue, I am reachable. But if you are here to be a harpy, if you are here to browbeat me, if you are here to engage in bad faith, I'm not going to apologize for what were objective observations and reasonable points to counter them. And we don't have to think the same. She can have her lens through which she sees something, and I can have mine. And we can both respect that we might not see. We're going to turn into Mike and the Mechanics. It's too late when we die. I need a like synth guitar to admit we don't see. Everyone needs to go watch Mike and the Mechanics, and the world would be a better place. So there you go. That's what I'm going to end it with. But thank you guys so much, and thank you for your warm reception on Mo edits the ending. I probably should have written it down, but I was a little. Here's the thing. I can do dark humor. I can do sassy responses. The hardest and most vulnerable thing for me to do, because I feel things so deeply and so greatly, is to honestly look at what I wish would have happened, and not gloss over things. And it's easy for me to be cynical. It's easy for me to be sarcastic, and that it's not so easy to be hopeful and grounded when this is my genre. So that's what I do, and I've always been a little bit. Look, feelings are uncomfortable for me. I told y'all I'm a Vulcan. We have very deep feelings, but they are deeply uncomfortable. They don't make logical sense. So we suppress them maladaptively through nicotine and caffeine or whatever works for you. Carbohydrates, Any hoozle, I am going to continue. So I did get my big metal stand in for my cross stitch stuff. But me being me, it is taking me longer to put it together, and Mr. Mo has school today. So I am attempting to put that together. I also will have a haul. This case hasn't been easy, you guys, especially right after Uvalde. So I may or may not have, and okay, confession here, Mofessional. I am a sucker for a mystery bag. And Piper Lou, the company that does all of my, like my Dictum shirt and a bunch of other t-shirts, had a bunch of mystery bags. So, okay, between you, me, and the internet and not Mr. Mo and our credit card statement, I may or may not have bought 4 mystery bags and a bunch of tumblers. Again, y'all need to be my ride or dies. We're not telling Mr. Mo. I'm just kidding. I used my fund money, so it's just a joke. But he will say, "Do you really need more stupid t-shirts?" And I was like, "Have you met me? You had me at curse word on t-shirt." So there you go. So I will be putting that video up when that comes in, and I will also be showing you guys my goal this weekend before the snow hits is to get my room clean. Mr. Mo has some ideas to help me with organization so that I can use my phone to give you guys a room tour, which I have promised you guys for a while. But I'm gonna be real with you guys. Look, I can keep this area looking like I am not part OCD, part chaos demon. Uh, but I'm more conscientious now than I was as a child, but I always seem to be either very, very clean, or the moment I have clutter, I can't foresee a workable solution with how to fix the clutter, I just get stuck and have no desire to clean it, but it slowly kills me with anxiety because I can't work in a cluttered. Look, a team of psychiatrists is going to take years to study what the hell went wrong with me, and I can only say good luck, you all. So remember, as you go into the world, be kind to yourself. Don't hit your mic. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. But have a sassy mouth and carry a can of bitch fire, because kindness doesn't equal weakness. Kindness doesn't equal a doormat. It doesn't mean you have to be a see you next Tuesday, but it doesn't mean you need to be a doormat. So it's all about balance, goodness and hoodness, if you will. Bye, you guys.